We'll have some young kids who will say it the best. It's like walking back into the future because it is a I know it is a great, kids see things the clearest. It's a historic structure that will soon be 100 years old, and yet it looks as if it's from the future. It defies a decade. It's really hard to define it in words until you experience it. Even then, it's hard to define.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Total Michigan, where we interview ordinary Michiganders doing some pretty extraordinary things. I'm your host, Cliff DuVernois. It's hard to think of Midland without thinking about the Dow family. It's not an exaggeration to think about how much impact the Dow family has had, not only for the businesses that they've created and the products they've created, but also too through their philanthropic work throughout not only Midland, but as well as the state of Michigan. Now, if you've ever been to the Dow Gardens and you've walked around and you've totally enjoyed that experience there, at some point in time, I will bet you dollars to donuts that you have looked across this small body of water and saw this absolutely beautiful house that was in the water. And to walk us through this little treasure in Midland, Michigan, and this is actually the Alden B Dow Home and Studio. One of the Dow family actually is a massive architect. And to walk us through the story of the house, the history of the house, and not only that, but a little bit about Alden B Dow is Craig McDonald. He is the executive director of the Alden B Dow Home and Studio, as well as the Alden and Vida Dow Family Foundations. Craig, how are you?
I am great and happy to be here. How are you today?
I am doing awesome. Thank you for asking. So why don't you tell us, what is the Alden B Dow Home and Studio?
The Alden B Dow Home and Studio is an incredible experience. We'll have some young kids who will say it the best, fourth graders who come to the building. It's like walking back into the future. Because it is a I know it is a great, kids see things the clearest. They see the building, they appreciate it the most of anyone, I think. It's a historic structure that will soon be 100 years old, and yet it looks as if it's from the future. It defies a decade. It's really hard to define it in words until you experience it. Even then, it's hard to define. Most of it was built in the 1930s, and yet because of who Mr. Dow was and creating it for the human, which always grows and changes, it defies a definition.
It certainly does. And I know we're going to talk a lot more about the history of the house. Before I do that, Craig, why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from? Where did you grow up?
I actually grew up in Midland. And growing up in Midland, I had an opportunity, a friend who worked for Mr. and Mrs. Dow, Alden and Vida Dow here. He was going away to college, and they needed someone to do like odd jobs after school, and eventually working in Mr. Dow's architectural firm. I knew of the Dows. I had met Mr. Dow once at the Midland Center for the Arts, was a massive project of his that he and Mrs. Dow brought to Midland. But I was asked if I wanted this after-school job, and came over and met Mrs. Dow, who took me through the building, and in their lovely way, we're so kind and gracious, and said, well, if you would consider it, we would love for you to work with us. And that was kind of my introduction into the world of mid-century modern architecture, my step into the great, incredible things that the Dow family did and continues to do for so many people throughout the state of Michigan.
So when we're talking about, because you said Mr. Dow and Mrs. Dow, you're talking about Alden Dow, who actually is the owner or was the owner of this property.
Correct. Alden and Vida Dow. Alden was one of the sons of Herbert and Grace Dow, Herbert being the founder of Dow Chemical Company. And Alden was their youngest son and had a passion for design and architecture and veered away from being an engineer, which he tried in school and wasn't his passion, wasn't his focus. And luckily, he had parents that said, be who you are, bring out the gifts, the innate gifts and talents you have.
And that's beautiful.
That's amazing, especially for the turn of the last century when, I think of Edsel Ford, probably had to go into the car company because of his father, Henry Ford. But Herbert and Grace Dow valued education, they valued culture, and they valued the unique talents and gifts that people brought, and we need to look at things from different perspectives. So off Alden Dow went to Columbia University after his brief stint at Michigan, studied engineering, and received a Bachelor of Architecture degree from Columbia.
And then we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I want to go back real quick to your story there, because you were talking about how you basically picked this up as a part-time job.
It truly was.
Just
it was
out.
A part-time job after I was in 10th grade when I started here. I started right before Mr. Dow passed away. He died soon after I got here. So it was every day after school, and it was, taking care of the cars, running errands, doing those kinds of things. And just this real interesting relationship began, this great appreciation for who they were and their kindness. And then working in the architectural firm in my, I think it was my senior year of high school in the construction department. And so it was also, as Mrs. Dow was aging, Mr. Dow had passed away in 1983, and Mrs. Dow said, I want to share this. I want to preserve this and share this. It made me a part of that plan for the future.
Because you had not only built that relationship with it, but also, too, I can't think of a better term for this, but you actually put a lot of sweat equity into the property, because you really got to know it at a very intimate level working here.
Without question. I always say I never ask anyone to do anything here that I haven't done myself. Washing windows, all kinds of things were in my purview, and still are to this day. We're a small staff, and so it's a really collective staff. But yeah, so it was when I started an architectural firm in a home, and then the idea was like, what if we share it in a different way going forward? And this is Mrs. Dow, Veda, and her family, her children and grandchildren, now great-grandchildren, saying, we were blessed with this name and blessed with the financial resources that came with it, but it's because of the hard work of everyone else in this whole region and in other places that we have this. So this needs to go back to the community, the things we have gathered, this legacy that Mr. Dow created. People can learn about themselves through it. And if we teach people about themselves and they build their own talents and gifts, they're going to be happy humans and give great things back to the world.
So let's go ahead and start diving into the story behind this particular house. You've already shared with us a little bit about the history of Alden. He was growing up. His parents said, hey, you don't have to follow in the family business if you want to do something else. So talk to us a little bit about his journey.
He grew up here in Midland in what we know as the Dow Gardens. That was the backyard for the Dow family. That's where Alden and his brothers and sisters played. That's where Alden learned about the beauty of nature, the designs of nature, the strength of nature, where he was immersed in it. And that certainly impacted his architecture later on, being an organic architect. With his parents and who they were and what they valued, I think that's the greatest gift he received, was from his parents and their appreciation for other things and different viewpoints. Travel. He got to travel to Japan when he was 17 or 18 years old, looking at that environment, looking at the beauty that's created from that culture, which we see all around Midland. That's where he learned about the relationship between buildings and nature and the impact each have on the other. And so then with formal schooling, that gained and helped grow his talents and gifts. And then he got married to this incredible woman who was studying education, Veda Bennett Dow, and had a bachelor's degree from Kalamazoo College and a master's degree from Columbia Teacher School, was also looking at the human and the growth and potential of human through education, as Alden was looking at it through buildings. They both had an opportunity to study with Frank Lloyd Wright, this very controversial architect, certainly at the time in the 1930s. But Wright is introducing an American aesthetic to our country, whereas prior to Wright and a few other people, we were an amalgamation of mostly our European ancestry. When we looked at architecture, Wright was saying, let's create an American aesthetic. Who are we? What are our materials? What is our land like? And how do we blend them?
This is the controversy that you were talking about there when he decided to start coming up with an American.
I think Wright was just introducing new ideas and using products in different ways. He was tenacious. He had, he was a bold human. He was outspoken, and he was introducing ideas we hadn't heard of or hadn't seen before. And that was very appealing to Alden Dow, that someone was thinking for themselves.
Nice.
And that's what the Dow family had always done, in a much more way of humility and kind of being under the radar. And I think like their buildings explain who they are. Frank Lloyd Wright, he builds a house called Falling Water, puts it on top of the waterfall. Alden Dow, his home and studio is at the end of a cul-de-sac, folded into the surrounding natural environment. So Wright loved the splash. He loved the notoriety. Alden Dow wanted to be one voice among many because he thought the best thing could be a concentration of variety because we're all different people and we all respond to things differently.
Certainly. And when you talk about his, because like you said, he studied under Wright as far as architecture goes. And I think everybody out there actually is very familiar with that name. So let's talk a little bit, because I know we only got so much time here, to kind of like compact his career a little bit. Talk to me about because I know he's designed a number of homes, he's designed a number of buildings, but talk to us about the scale of his work and the influences that he's had, not only in the Midland area, but around the state.
Yeah, and I think you just mentioned a really important part, not just his work, but then the influence of it. Mr. Dow, throughout his career, designed about 600 buildings.
That's amazing.
Amazing. Many of we have roughly 100 structures in Midland that he designed that were built. There are many unbuilt structures as well, for one reason or another, which are in our archives, phenomenal things of differing sizes. But it was also that he also was tenacious with new products, new ideas, creating a block system like the block that surrounds us in this house called the unit block system, but always challenging ideas, always willing to look at options, always willing to incorporate test products, always willing to challenge the world around us. He said if we were going to grow in the field of architecture, it was with something new. And you have to think about that constantly. We appreciate the past, we learn that, we get that foundation, but then we're always, as humans, we grow. That's what our goal is to grow as humans.
Right.
And so that meant challenging building products and new systems. And so other architects said, wow, look what's happening in Midland. Look who this guy is. And so they came here, but he's also the architect in Michigan who introduced modernism to Ann Arbor and to East Lansing and to Petoskey and to Saginaw and to all these other communities that then open people up for new definitions. So his influence is as large, if not larger, than his true body of work.
That's amazing. And so let me ask you this question here, because we're talking about influence. What do you think it is about, this house? Because people come here, they can take tours. You can see the grandeur of this place, because this is beautiful. Anybody who has got any kind of inkling about architecture, or if you've renovated a home, I think you'd come here and really appreciate the place. But what is it about this house that you think just resonates with people?
I think that you can come multiple times and it impacts you in different ways because it's so connected to nature. What's happening outside impacts us in every way. The sunlight behind me right now, streaming in. This room is very different on a dull day or a rainy day, all beautiful in their own way. I think also that it challenges you and reminds you there are different definitions, that a house can be something other than a rectangular building with a pitched roof. How do materials impact you? I think when you come here, again, I think you learn about yourself because you're constantly challenging yourself like, wow, this is so different.
Correct.
I had a fourth grader years ago, this brilliant young woman who I wanted to hire on the spot. And she said, being in this house is like being in a Picasso. And I said, can you explain to us what you mean by this? This is a fourth grader, mind you.
Yeah.
And she said, well, you look at a painting by Picasso and they say, oh, it's a portrait of a person. It doesn't look like a person. I know I'm in a building, but it doesn't look like any other building I've ever been in.
It is.
That's pretty magical. And I think that you can come here repeatedly and you take from it how it impacts you, how you see. When you ask Mr. Dow a question about the building, he would answer you with a question like, oh, did you intend for it to be like this? Well, how do you see it? Would be a response. Like he wanted us to be really great observers in life. He wanted us to create our own stories and to question and to learn through our own eyes and our own ways of thinking and doing.
Right. Now, so just to go back here and put a cap on it. So you were talking before about how you started working here and a few years later, Mr. Dow passed away.
Very soon. Yeah. Right. The year I started, he passed away. Correct.
And then at some point in time, his wife made the decision, right? Rather than sell the house, and, walk away, let's retire to Florida and thaw out like so many people from Michigan do. But she said, you know what, we're going to keep this, but we're going to open it up to the public. Talk to us about that decision.
I think that it was certainly after Mr. Dow passed away that Mrs. Dow, together with her 3 kids, that they said, this needs to be given back to the community. It just, a tiny part of their philanthropy, to be quite honest, because they still do so many great things through grants, through their foundations. But it was about, this was something unique and different. This is an identifier of Midland. If you grew up in Midland, you went to a church, you went to a school, you interacted with public buildings. He actually created definition of buildings. If you grew up in this town and continues to, the public library, the Center for the Arts, many, many buildings. And so it's like, let's share this because it encourages people to think about their own creativity and the things that they can create that can impact humans going forward. I mean, it's been lovely from the beginning. And with their focus on education, that education could be done in a different way. There are many ways to learn from the beginning. One of this hands-on.
Right.
We use the artwork in the house. We use the correspondence between Wright and Dow and other people, that we use this lifespan of Mr. and Mrs. Dow and their family to teach people about possibilities. That was a very conscious decision by Mrs. Dow and her family. And then just said, let's preserve the building, let's preserve the things in the building, and then let's move. Let's go.
Nice. For our audience, we're going to take a quick break and thank our sponsors. When we come back, Craig McDonald, Executive Director of the Alden B, Dow Home and Studio, is going to talk to us a lot more about what you can expect when you come here. We will see you after the break. Hey, if you are enjoying these great interviews, just take a moment and go to totalmichigan.com/join, and you can get these episodes sent directly to your inbox, because there's a lot more great stories coming. See you there. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Total Michigan, where we interview ordinary Michiganders doing extraordinary things. I'm your host, Cliff DuVernois. Today, we are talking with Craig McDonald, the Executive Director of the Alden B. Dow Home and Studio, located in Midland, Michigan. And Craig, before the break, we were talking about how the Dow family had decided to take this house, open it up to the public. It's now open up for tours, and people can come here and absolutely see this absolutely beautiful day. It's an amazing way actually to actually do some things in Midland, which is great. What I would like to do is I would like to talk about how this home in particular has impacted the local community around Midland. You've talked before briefly about some of the small programs, but I would really like to kind of flesh that out. So if you would, walk us through that.
Great. Well, I think, again, coming here, you learn about yourself. You also learn about your heritage, because if you grow up in Midland, Dow architecture is a big part of it, because he designed so many structures in Midland, like all different types of structures, gas stations and flower shops and schools, houses, all kinds of things. And so a goal was to have young people, especially in the building at an elementary, middle, and high school, meeting different needs. All of our educational programming is curriculum focused. Like, we study curriculum and develop programs around curriculum, because teachers have so much to do. Teachers have a monumental job. And so we thought, okay, if we base it all in curriculum, plus it's a fun hands-on activity, that's win-win for everybody. And so from 4th grade up, we have developed different educational programs, whether it's a social studies program, an English program, a phenomenal experience with high schools in Midland called the Theory of Knowledge, which is part of the International Baccalaureate program, where students come here 1 day a week for a whole year.
Oh, wow.
And spend a class period once a week in this building. And so it's utilizing all the things that are here, and always open to new ideas as well. And so we want to make it accessible for education. We do have daily tours, as you said, every day, Tuesday through Saturday at 2 p.m. and on Fridays and Saturdays, 11 a.m. And you can schedule a private tour. We have bus groups that come, 2 bus lines that come and bring bus groups of people every week, May through October. We do special events programming. We offer movie Sundays. We try to utilize the incredible resources that are here in different ways for all age levels to learn about this heritage and about themselves.
What I would like to do is because some of the programs here, like you were talking about, like the students come here for 1 hour a week for an entire year. That is amazing. The one program you were telling me about, and I'd like to talk a little bit more. This is something near and dear to my heart: creative writing.
We started a program called At the Dow House, which is a 7th grade writing program that meets core objectives in 7th grade English, to get kids to look at sensory details, be able to then incorporate them into a story. And so as you've already seen a little bit of, this is a hyper visual building.
Oh, yes.
The building itself, the things in it, its environment that we're, set in a pond in the, on the side of Dow Gardens. And so during that program, and within the first year, I was with a group of students here in the living room and dining room, and this young woman was writing. You could just tell she just loved writing. I mean, it just was like oozing from her. And so I just said, oh, I can just tell you love writing. Tell me about your writing club. And she's like, we don't have a writing club. I'm like, we don't have a writing club in our community for young people? And so that same year, we contacted both of the middle schools in the city and said, we would love to sponsor a writing club for middle school, and we will pay for the bus to come and pick the kids up.
Oh, beautiful.
And because busing is an essential part of anything today, schools don't have budgets to do those things. And so we have what the kids define and entitled the Young Writers Studio. They came up with the name. We wanted their input. We thought, what would be success for this if we're going to offer this and, use some resources that we have to bring these kids here and spend time with them. What's success? We thought is that 15 or 20 kids. On average, we get between 40 and 65 middle school kids who come here once a month for a writing club. They come in, it is pandemonium, of course, when that many young people come in your building, which we love. We love seeing the shoes lined up and the musical instruments and the computer bags. They have a snack. They, can be social for a little bit. Then we give them 3 prompts, which they can use or don't have to use. And we break them up into usually 3 or 4 groups and are throughout the building. It is perfect silence. I know people will not believe me when I say you can have 65 middle school kids in a building and it's silence. These are kids young students who want to focus on writing, have a passion for it. They write for a certain amount of time, and then we say, okay, if anyone would like to share, and we have sharing time. You're just overwhelmed by the things they're thinking about.
Right.
The issues in their lives or the beauty they're creating. And so like in a time in our day when the public tours would be over, the building is relatively empty except for those of us working for the foundation who are still in the building. But what a perfect use to utilize the space to inspire something like creative writing.
Certainly. And when you're talking about influence on people, because I know that throughout the year, people are coming here. You're talking about bus groups coming here and you got the tours, everything else like that. What is your hope that people take away when they have an experience here?
There are a lot of takeaways, I think. I think that we learn a little bit about Mr. and Mrs. Dow and the impact that humans have on other people. We forget that the world is creative ideas that come usually from one person, and then that idea is shared and then we expand it. That it's individuals who change our world. They can allow us to see differently. They create new definitions for us. We all have the power to do that. And I think that that's a really important part of coming here, is remembering that, being reminded of that in our very complex, media social world. It's still about an idea you have as an individual.
Right.
And I think this reminds you of it, and the impact of environment. That we're in structures all day long. The size of the room, the shape of the room, the colors, the textures, the materials, its integration, that all impacts us in positive and negative ways. I think that's another big impact. And then will people talk like, oh, I'm going to see my house very differently when I go back to it.
That is true.
Yeah. And so I think, and that influence that Mr. and Mrs. Dow had and continue to have, again, through the gifts they've left and are still impacting people. They want a rich community. They want an educated community, and an appreciation for other people and other ideas.
So when we talk about, because you referenced this at the beginning of the show about the power of story and, about challenging people when they walk through the door. Why don't you share with us maybe a surprising or maybe even a little known story here that visitors are always amazed to hear?
I think that the building was built in pieces. It's 4 different pieces put together. It looks like this cohesive whole. It looks like, man, he just built this large, just under 20,000 square foot building. But it wasn't. He was always thinking about the growth and potential of people, and that related to buildings. that you design a structure, but you have to think about the growth of the humans that will utilize that building, whether it's a home or an office or a church, whatever, house of faith. And so the building grew over time. It was a tiny little workshop, and then called the first drafting room, and then added on was the wonderful floating conference room we were in a little bit earlier, which is a room truly submerged in a pond. So when you sit there, you're at level with the water around you. And then, as the business grew, as his architectural firm grew, then the physical space grew. And yet, it was all an idea from the beginning. On the original drawings, you'll see office space, future house.
Oh, wow.
That was all planned from the beginning, not necessarily exactly how it was then realized, but the idea that as we need this, if we grow as a business, if we grow as a family, we will need these things. And it was a part of the idea that we have to think about the growth and potential. A really fun example I always go back to is in Florence, the Duomo in Florence. The architect who designed it designed this incredible dome on the top of it. Yet at that time, they didn't have the technology to build a dome, but he said, it's going to take about 100 years to build this building. And by that time, we'll have the technology to build the dome.
Sure.
That, like that architect, Mr. Dow was always thinking about the growth and potential, what's in the future in new definitions. And I love that someone is thinking about the future. In the 1940s, he wrote a paper called Man in Modern Architecture, and he wrote a paper on what he hoped what the world would look like, kind of from an architectural perspective, in the year 2000. I don't know if I'm thinking about 60 years from now, or how many people are thinking about 60 years, but if we don't think about it, it won't happen. He would say, if we don't think about it, write about it, draw about it, talk about it, it won't happen.
I love this concept of future thinking. What would be maybe something that you would hope that the Alden B Dow Home and Studio could inspire future generations, or maybe what it could contribute to the legacy of Midland going forward?
I think always new ideas. I mean, it's growth. We're inspiring growth in people. You recently had a guest on your show, Ryan, who has designed this incredible collapsible skateboard. He was one of our Theory of Knowledge students. He did every camp, every experience we have, he participated in, and he will say this is where he started to think. He's from a family of engineers, and he said, I wanted to kind of marry this engineering mind that I have and legacy I have in my family, but it was also I wanted to design this skateboard, and that this kind of opened him and gave him somewhat permission to be this entrepreneur that he is today.
Right.
That's the legacy of this building. And the impact of coming here is challenging the world in, as Mr. Dow would say, positive and constructive ways. He had these three guiding principles of honesty, humility, and enthusiasm, which is part of a larger philosophy that he had. But those are pretty great principles to live by and to be inspired by.
So if somebody is coming here, they've never been here before, what would be something that you would recommend, highly encourage, that they see, maybe spend some time with? What would that be?
You mean before coming or while they're here?
While they're here.
Okay, while they're here. I think that the way the tours are given, which is interaction, it's a dialogue. It's not a monologue. We're speaking with people, not at people, that we learn where people are from. And so if we know, well, we do know, if you're coming from Petoskey, in the archives, the archivist puts out a building that Mr. Dow designed in Petoskey, so it relates to your community.
Oh, cool.
So if you're from East Lansing, if you're from Ann Arbor, if you're from Grosse Pointe, so that connection is there. I think whatever you connect with, that you are allowed to ask questions and encouraged to ask questions about, tell me more about this artwork, this pottery. Tell me more about these trains. Tell me more about this copper roof. And that it's an interaction and, a fun experience that you learn from it in a fun way about what you're interested in, what you connect with while you're here.
Right. So let's use your imagination for a second. Knowing what you know about the place now, because you basically built your whole career here.
It has been my whole professional career after university, all through high school, all through university, then after university, yes, it has been.
If we could somehow lift that veil between this world and next, and you could ask Mr. Dow a question, what would it be?
Oh, there's a long list of questions. I'm going to have to think a little bit on that. But we have to remember also with history, there are always going to be unanswered questions. And I think it's actually a really good thing. It makes us think. It makes us look at things from different perspectives. We never like to say what Mr. or Mrs. Dow would think today. We don't know. The family, his children and grandchildren, really want us to look at what life is and what it is today, and how can we support it? How can we challenge people to think for themselves and think creatively? There's so many questions details that we want to know. Why.
I already know how he would answer it.
So he'd answer it with a question. Well,
yes.
What do you think? Without question. Well, there's again so many detailed questions like, what do you hope for the next phase? I'd probably ask him more about the future than maybe even a detail like, what do you want to see next at the Home and Studio? How do you want us to inspire people going into the future?
Ooh.
Through his vision of what we've done together, the family and the staff, because it's an amazing staff of passionate humans who we're all very proud to be a part of this legacy and share it with other people and to inspire them. And so, I would say, like, what would you like to see in the future? How would you like us to challenge people?
Right. Beautiful. And if somebody is listening to this, they want to come and check you out, find you online, because your website's beautiful. The videos that you have up there are absolutely beautiful. But how can they do that?
You can do that, but again, getting online at the Alden Dow Home and Studio website, abdow.org. We've also started a second organization called Mid-Century Modern Midland, where we've now documented not only his structures in Midland, but then all those other mid-century structures that he influenced, other architects and designers. And we've documented about 400 buildings in total in Midland that were built between 1930 and 70. And so that's Mid-Century Modern Midland has a website. Again, we have lots of social media. We have Facebook, all the things of the day, so to speak, if that's how you want information. The best way to learn about the Alden B. Dow Home and Studio, Mr. Dow, is to come to the Alden B. Dow Home and Studio.
Which I highly recommend that you do.
Yeah, come for a tour. Come for movie Sundays in February and March. Come to adult camp or summer camp for kids. Come to special events or lectures that we host. You have to experience this building to fully appreciate it. That it's almost beyond definition in ways, and everyone, as we've talked about, takes something different way and would define it in a different way, which is exactly the right way.
Nice. Craig, thank you so much for taking time to chat with us today. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming here and sharing this information. It's been a lot of fun.
For our audience, you can always roll on over to totalmichigan.com and get the links that Craig just mentioned. We'll see you next time when we talk to another Michigander doing some pretty extraordinary things. We'll see you then.